Hi, welcome to One Eye on the Page. I'm Scott. This is a weekly wrap up for the week of the 20th through the 26th of November. I'm actually filming this right now on a Tuesday because, well, I usually do my wrap up at the end of the week on Sunday. I'm in different circumstances right now, so I'm kind of spreading out my recordings. Let's go ahead and get started. And as you can see, these are not my usual settings. I have taken over the YouTube stream of Robin at Hobbit's reading list. No, actually, as many of you know, Robin is my daughter. I am here for Thanksgiving, so I am filming in an area that Robin usually films in. Robin had me come spend Thanksgiving with her, and then she went to work and has left me alone all day long. So I've actually been catching up on reading a little bit. So what I'm going to do right now is just kind of go over what I am reading currently, not including books that I may have looked at recently but haven't started yet. So I will go with the physical books that I am currently reading right now. Book number one is Hobgoblin by John Coyne. It is, as I have mentioned before, a book that I read when I was much younger. Somebody asked me a question on the comment, what was one, I believe, one of my favorite horror books or something. And I didn't want to mention like a Stephen King one because that would seem kind of to go without saying. So I mentioned this one that I really liked and made me want to read it. So I bought the book and I've started reading it. It's been a while since I've been reading because I've been reading some books very slowly, but it's about 300 pages, I believe, and I'm about a little bit past halfway through the book now. And nostalgia is nostalgia for a reason. Maybe we shouldn't go back and look at the things that we are nostalgic for because I read this at least the first time when I was a teenager. I've read it a few times, but it's one of those things where I haven't read it for decades, I believe. And I really enjoyed it, but I was also a different person at the time. And the main character, who also happens to be named Scott, irritates the crap out of me. And I want to gently shake him and say, "Now, son, you're being a dick to everybody." Uh, Also, many of the characters in here are just stereotypes. There's no depth to them. It's a little bit creepy. Some of the sexual politics in a book published in the 80s that I'm looking at through like a 2023 lens. There's some of it I am still enjoying, but this was a book that I had a lot of nostalgia for, and reading again is just kind of like, oh, it's like you watch a lot of movies from the 80s and just go, oh, maybe Bender wasn't that great in The Breakfast Club, or maybe Allison shouldn't have felt the need to change, or not other John Hughes movies, or it's just like, ooh, that's gross. Or, not just John Hughes, but those were the ones that came up to mind immediately. So I'm reading that. I do expect to finish it this week. So I hope that I will tell you by the end of the video, yes, I finished it. This is my rating. My childhood has disappointed me. The next book is Wildwood Road by Christopher Golden. Another one that I've been reading for a while, since about the 1st of October. Uh, it's about 300 pages also. I am about 115 pages into it. It's moving slowly, like real slow. And I don't think it's a bad book, but it's I think part of the reason why it has been difficult for me to really read through it quickly is that it's kind of dragging, and I'm like, okay, I expect some stuff here, and it's just not happening. Uh, The writing's fine. The character work is fine. I think a lot of the reason that it is slow is for Golden to build up the two main characters here. But yeah, it's just dragging a little. I am, of course, am also reading A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens, a man whose name I forgot for just a millisecond there. Uh, Read it every year from the 1st of November to Christmas Eve. We are almost to the end of the first ghost appearance, the Ghost of Christmas Past. And today and yesterday, I have FaceTime my child to do readings for this, which we will do the rest of the week until Saturday. No, Saturday. Saturday I fly back, and then Sunday they fly back. So uh, spending time with their mother over Thanksgiving. So it's a little weird to do that. I don't know. I think something shiny was being shown because they were just like this, and I was like, hello. Anyway, so I'm reading that. Of course, I enjoy the book. It's a book I've read many, many, many times. Uh, so no surprises in the book. Obviously, I try to get better at reading it aloud because I am no audiobook narrator. But you read something often enough, you can kind of know when phrases need to be said certain ways, and you have certain voices for certain characters, although sometimes multiple characters end up having the same voice. But again, I'm not a narrator. So those are the physical books that I am reading currently. I am also reading Girl Flesh by Leitz, the extreme horror book. It is the fourth extreme horror book I'm reading out of five. I read the first three rather quickly, and then I just got to this one and just I'm in quicksand. I am more than halfway through the book now. Some stuff really has to happen in the last half of the book because there's nothing extreme horror about this yet. Not that I need something to be extreme horror, but I'm reading this book specifically because it is extreme horror. Because I'm going to read five books from the extreme horror category, and this one was supposed to be extreme horror, but it's not. I am frustrated by the authors doing a lot of telling, not showing. I'm frustrated by the narrator because it's written in first person, and the narrator is just really full of herself. And again, she keeps telling me stuff, but like she apparently formed this connection with this other woman who she's basically trapped with overnight, and she tells us this, but we have not seen this at all. So it's very frustrating book in a lot of ways. It's not so frustrating that I feel that like I'm going to DNF it. I almost wish it was, because I could just say, okay, I'm done with this. I will just start on the next extreme horror book and then pick another one to replace this. But I'm halfway through it now. I feel like I have to finish it. I am also reading The Golden Bat by PG Wodehouse. It is one of his school stories. It's a book that I have not read yet by PG Wodehouse. I plan on doing 5 Year Battle for PG Wodehouse after I finish the 5 Year Battles for Agatha Christie. So I need to work on actually finishing the books that I haven't read yet. This one is I almost feel like cheating and say, oh, yeah, this book is, I think there's 6 books in that 5 year period. This book is ranked fifth because I almost guarantee that's probably where it's going to be. But I'm not going to cheat. I'm actually going to read it. But it's a school story. It involves young boys really into sports. It doesn't really necessarily have a plot to it other than being about young boys at a boarding school really into sports. The nominal plot is that somebody has lost a gold bat, and if it's found where they think it may be found, they could get in trouble because they could be associated with a prank that was done. And yeah, and of course, PG Wodehouse is not found at this point his comic stride, which he's really known for his comedic writing, but he has not gotten there yet in this book. I know at least this was, I believe, published in 1903. I know in 1906 he published Love Among the Chickens, which, while not my favorite Woodhouse book, definitely has the Woodhouse humor in it. So I have at least 3 years, and I think I've read a couple other books. So I think I have maybe one other book I need to read before I can do the 5 year battle for this 5 year period. So I think, a third of the way through it. Nothing has really happened, which, having read The Pot Hunters, his first book, which is another school story, I'm not surprised that nothing has really happened because I don't expect that from his school stories. I those 2 books are on Kindle. This other book is also on Kindle. It's one that I don't think I read. I know about it. I don't think I read it. I may have read it, but if I did, it was a long, long time ago, and I only read it once. But I know about it. Lots of people know about this book, even if they don't necessarily know what it's about. But it's Flowers for Algernon by Daniel Keyes. Obviously, about a young man who not very intelligent, and he is made smarter. My Massachusetts came out there. He is made smarter, and we kind of show the progress of that over time, and then what happens if it doesn't hold. So I kind of know the story of it, which I just either know from getting it through kind of osmosis or something, or because I did read it, I just have forgotten that I read it. I know the story, I just don't think I read the story. So I started that. Uh, Today and tomorrow, Robin has to work, so I don't really have a lot to do these 2 days. So I hope to get a lot of reading done. In the last book that I am currently reading, this one is an audiobook. It is The Union Street Bakery by Mary Ellen Taylor, which I think is sort of a mystery. I don't quite know yet. I kind of did a random pick on this on my Audible, so it's interesting so far, but I don't necessarily know where the story's going yet. A woman has lost her job in the finance world, not necessarily through her own fault, and she goes to work for her parents' bakery. Right now, she kind of has to rescue her sister, who who has taken over the bakery from their parents. Uh, I'm blanking on names right now, but the main character has adopted her 2 sisters, are biological children. Uh, but her one sister is a very good baker, but not very good at business, so she's kind of let things go by the wayside. So the main character has to come in and try to solve that. And there's some mystery about her biological mother that I'm just getting into now. It's like a 11-hour book, I believe, and I'm like an hour and a half into it. So it's interesting, but yeah, I really don't necessarily know what genre it is yet. I It seems like there's a ghost in here also, and there's a spooky old woman who's telling the main character things, and I also I'm losing very I'm losing patience with cranky senior citizens who act like assholes. So that is what I am reading now. I don't know that I will do another video segment here unless I finish one of the books. I will probably just wait until I get back home and hopefully we'll have. I hope to have finished at least 4 books by the end of this video. I hope to have finished all 5 of these books and at least started on other ones. But we shall see. Who knows? It's Thanksgiving week. I'm here alone with cats who avoid me, which you know is different than my house where cats won't get off me. But so that's it for right now. I will talk to you in a couple of seconds for you. It is the end of the week. I am back in my own home now. I finished 5 books this week, so I didn't keep up the trend. I did finish more than one book. So I'm going to go and start with the first book I finished, which is Hobgoblin by John Coyne, which, as I mentioned, is a book that I have read before. It's been decades since I've read it, and I wish I hadn't reread it because, much like comedy movies from the 80s, it just doesn't hold up like it did. Uh, I was a young man when I read it. It was in the 80s when I read it, and I just didn't look at novels then as I do now. The main character, who shares my name, Scott, uh, maybe in the 80s I felt a connection to him, and now reading him, I just think he's a self-centered, whiny jackass. Yes, his father died, and he's upset about that, obviously. But and this is a me thing, and it doesn't necessarily. It's not necessarily the correct thing, but I myself, because I know, again, this is a me thing. I don't think that when you go through something that you should just take it out on everybody. And he takes it out on everybody. His mother, the girl who likes him for reasons I don't understand. Uh, the bullies at school, sure, that's understandable. The football team, just everybody. And if this was written now and he acted the way he did, I mean, he sees a therapist in the book, but really, he probably should have uh, spent some time in a facility. And the story itself just isn't particularly interesting. I feel bad because I really liked this book when I was younger. I actually told somebody on YouTube comments about how I like this book, and I reread it, and yeah, it's not good. I'm giving it a 2 stars. A little bit of that is nostalgia. The character work in here is just poor. The next book that I finished was, okay, I'm going to put you down, Wash. I've been back about a day and he's just super clingy. The next book I finished was, nope, go away. The next book I finished was PG Wodehouse, The Gold Bat. It is another school story like the Pot Hunters that I've talked about in last couple of months, I believe. It's set at Riken, which we have seen in the Mike and Smith series, and uh, there are many different characters and many different subplots. But the big one is that there's this gold bat that one of the lads borrows, and I can't keep up with all their names, and I'm horrible with names anyway, so I don't even remember the man's name anymore. But he loses it. Unfortunately, he happens to lose it when he is tarring and feathering a statue of a prominent man there, and so the person who did not do any tar and feathering, but whose gold bat's there, possibly has to face some consequences. And there's also a thing about a league which was part of the school before but had gone away, but they are rambunctious and just kind of hazing and everything, and they start destroying people's studies, and then they send a threatening letter that has to do with, and I couldn't figure out what it was because they were talking football, but it's like they talked about like a 30-point lead. I was like, there's no way the soccer that somebody has a 30-point lead. And it's like, I don't think they're playing American football in this boarding school in England. Apparently, it means rugby in this instance, but yeah, there's a lot of sports talk for early 20th century English boarding schools, which didn't really fully understand. So I was like, sports happens. Okay, moving on to the plot. It was okay. I mean, it's a PG Woodhouse school story. I gave this one 2.5 stars. It was okay. I think it was better than the Pot Hunters personally, but not particularly that much better. The third book that I finished was Girl Flesh by May Leitz after a month, possibly plus, of trying to read this book. It is for an extreme horror video that I'm doing, so I will get more into it in there. But I will just say with this book, it is not extreme horror. There's not much extreme that happens. No real extreme violence or sex or anything. What it does have is one of the most annoying narrators that I have seen, and I have read Mark Manson's The Subtle Art of Not Giving Enough. That one's probably still more annoying, but yeah, this one was just overall a disappointment. Again, I will give more in depth about this when I do my video for extreme horror. Which this will make the second book that I don't really think was that extreme, even though people call this an extreme horror book and the author calls it an extreme horror book. I am finally reading the last book in the extreme horror 5 book challenge that I'm doing. It's called Brother, and I can't remember the author's name. I believe the initials are AA. I will put it here. I do believe it's going to be more along the line of extreme horror. But whether or not that makes a better book or not, I cannot tell you yet. But I will say, I just started reading it 2 days ago, and this is while I was visiting my daughter for Thanksgiving. and a bunch of other stuff going on too. And I'm already like 15% of the way through it. And it took me a long time to get the 15% in Girl Flesh. So, Girl Flesh, 1.5 stars. Think that's being generous, and I may lower it when I do the extreme horror one, but I think as of right now, out of the 4 books I read, it is the worst one. So the next book I finished was Flowers for Algernon by Daniel Keyes. This is one I have not read before, but I did read the short story. This is the novel. I read the short story like when I was a teenager, so I don't have a lot of memory of it, but I do remember reading it. The novel does, I think, suffer a little bit from being a novel. I think that this could. I don't have a problem with being expanded from a short story. I think it probably should have just been maybe a novella. There's a bit of, and I'm turning because Wash is trying to jump on me. So um, there's a bit of bloat with this book. At Robin's house, the cats pretty much left me alone. These guys will not. It's also, if you haven't read it, it's an epistolary novel. It's about a man, Charlie Gordon, who has an IQ, I believe, of 78. And he is given an operation that raises his IQ. And so it is him writing about his experiences from when he first starts this until his IQ increases, and then the result of his intelligence growing, but also he is emotionally not progressing as far as he does with his intelligence. And also, he's seeing people in his life in new lights, seeing things that he didn't see in his previous state. I do have to say, and I don't know that this is necessarily the message of the book, but Intelligent Charlie is a bit of a pain in the ass, although also understandable a little bit. And I don't think this was the message that Daniel Keyes was going for, but it does almost seem to come across a little bit that he's saying, at least for Charlie, this one character, that he was better off and happier, mentally slower. And I mean, I can well, it's a very old book, but I'll try not to spoil for it. Charlie having knowledge of everything makes it a little bit sadder. And of course, if you don't know this story, which again, I read the short story, but I also kind of knew the story anyways. Algernon is a mouse who has also had an operation to make him smarter. So I enjoyed the novel, even though it was written in a epistolary form, which is one of my least favorite tactics that authors use. It's got that. Also, it has bloat. It's a bit bloated. You could cut this in half, be perfectly fine. So it's still a good story, still an interesting story. Does the novel add that much more to the short story? It does add, but I also think the length takes away from a little bit. But I will overall give this a 4. but I will also suggest that I prefer the short story. The last book that I read, I finished it 2 hours ago while I was driving back from the airport picking up my kid. It is The Union Street Bakery by Mary Ellen Taylor. I listened to it on audiobook. Honestly, this one's just weird. I couldn't tell what it was supposed to be at the beginning. It's one of those ones I played craps and said I'm gonna pick a story from Audible that's on Audible Plus, and I came up with this one. It seemed interesting from the short synopsis that I saw, but the synopsis doesn't really go into it. A woman who is in financial career gets fired because her boss screwed up, and then the company gets taken over and the new people pretty much just push her out, and she ends up going back to her parents' bakery and working there. And her parents are sort of somewhat retired, and her sisters are working there, and she's adopted. The two sisters are biological children. She was apparently abandoned there by her mother when she was 3 years old, and the baker and his wife ended up adopting her. She also has her ex fiance moves to town. Kind of, I mean, not coincidental because there's a purpose behind it, but I'm just kind of like, meh. And there's ghosts, but everybody's treating the ghosts like it's a normal thing, even though they're surprised that there are ghosts. It's like the author doesn't really know what she wants to do. Oh, also there's flashbacks and slavery and it's like this author just didn't really want to step in any one direction. And so she just keeps peeking out into these multiple directions. And it's a bit frustrating. And it's just weird. Not necessarily bad, it's just weird. And the author, it just has some quirks. It's like, I 4 times, I think, the main character goes to take a shower, meaning for it to be a quick shower, and then the hot water just makes her stay a little bit longer. And that's it. There's no other purpose to that. The author just keeps bringing that up, and it does not play any part in the novel. It, I don't understand that. It kind of just ended. There wasn't really much of an ending, and there's just questions asked. Like, there's one of the ghosts, it's like, why is this ghost doing this? I don't think we get the answer at the end of the book. I know there's at least a second book, but I talked about this with what, 2 part sugar, 1 part murder. It's like, no, don't give me a novel to be apparently its own novel, not without a to be continued or anything, and then have questions brought up in the book and not answered. I originally was going to say this was a 3.5, a light 3.5, but I'm actually going to say a 3. I did enjoy some of the characters in here. I like some of the story. Also, authors, stop doing this. if you're gonna write it in first person, then write the entire book in first person. Don't write it and then but these 4 or 5 chapters, I'm gonna go and just do it third person. It's like, make a commitment. If you can't write the entire book in first person, don't write any of it in first person. Stop doing that. It's annoying. It's my soapbox, and I will put it over here, but I will get back on that soapbox again. There are some times where it's understandable that you write the majority of the book in first person, and you have some chapters that are not in first person. I didn't see a purpose in it in this book. And basically it's like the author's like, oh, I need to do this, but I can't do it in first person, so I'm just not going to. No, you made it first person, make everything first person. And yeah, it's things that I just get up my own ass about. But yeah, I'm gonna go and give it a 3. So I have now started The Bell Jar by Sylvia Plath. So that's gonna be a fun romp. And I'm still working on Wildwood Road by Christopher Golden. I think I might get it finished this month. I kind of went through all the other books that I was reading this month. And of course, Brother, and we've just gotten to the second Ghost and A Christmas Carol. So that's where I'm at right now with reading. Please like and subscribe, leave a comment, and I will talk to you next time.